Today we have Jenna Carlton, who is known as the Millennial Veteran. And I actually reached out to her on LinkedIn because of a post that she made, and she knows exactly what post I'm talking about. And because of this, I started following her, and I, again, reached out because she's very involved with the millennial crowd transitioning from service to veteran status and getting out and stuff like that. So she is definitely a bunch of knowledge. And then after I reached out to her, I saw an article that you were quoted in Task and Purpose. So yeah, we're just going to dive into all of this. So can you just talk about a little bit about what the millennial veteran is?
Sure. So I started this when I went to my local Legion. I couldn't find anyone younger. I went and I did an internship in Congress, and I was like, wow, everyone's older, where are the younger veterans? So I just started reaching out online, and it started as a Facebook group, just trying to get my friends together and share resources and what it was like navigating the civilian world, especially after doing like maybe one or two terms and getting out. So yeah.
That's amazing. So what did you do at Congress
So
or
I
for
was,
Congress?
yeah, I did an internship at the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. So I got to sit in on the hearings and hear the big issues that, the government was hearing about. What were they going to do about it? What did they want to do? And I got to hear a lot about the VA side. The VA would testify and kind of hear their excuses for why they're not meeting the requirements that Congress sets for them. So it's kind of like disheartening because you can't really do anything. You can just yell at the VA. You can't really enforce them. So it was hard. And I was like, I know there's a different way that I could make a difference without the politics side.
That's crazy. I mean, that is something that you always hear, like the VA, doesn't meet the standards, and especially when it comes to suicide rates. And I know I mentioned that article, that Task and Purpose article, and I think you know which one I'm talking about, that women veterans, their suicide rate has increased, or the risk among female veterans are higher, right? So,
Yes.
what specific factors do you think elevated or contribute to the elevated suicide risk?
Yeah, it was very hard to read that because just being in our demographic as a younger female veteran, we are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than our civilian counterparts. And to me, I see that because you know what it's like being a mom and having to support children and also having a full-time job and trying to do that outside of the military. And military is kind of notorious for divorces. We have a lot of female single veterans with kids because of just the strains it puts on relationships. And also the amount of military sexual trauma that women face in the service is it really takes a toll on us mentally. So we are more likely to be raising kids, having to meet that same income, and then also dealing with our personal traumas and mental health issues. And so to me, it's no surprise. And also, the support system for women veterans just isn't there yet with the VA. I know they're making progress by having more women's care available, but I did my pregnancies. I'm not sure if you did through the VA, and I was recommended to go out in town, which was nice, but also there wasn't that seamless care. Like I wasn't being checked in with my normal doctor who could have caught postpartum if I was just seeing the same doctor. I went out in town and then I went back to the VA, which I don't like going to the VA, so I never went back there.
I know. I'm the same way with the VA, but mine was through. So I was a spouse, so I got out, and then I was a spouse. My first two pregnancies were in a military hospital, but because I wasn't active duty, the only follow up care that I did receive was just the baby appointment, and they're like, "Do you have postpartum?" They never
Right.
checked on to see how I was. And so when I had the twins, we obviously had to go off base. And it was the same thing. The moment I delivered, I never saw my doctor again. And
Wow.
then so my PCM, he I actually never even saw my PCM. And I went in for the twins, like 1 month checkup or whatever the first checkup was. And they had you fill out that chart. And I was like, yeah, I'm struggling with depression. Like, postpartum is no joke.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back into like the military side, I did fill out my PHA, and it wasn't necessarily for me, but I was saying it like I wanted more information about something that my family was dealing with. And it took them a year to get back to me, and they said, "Hey, did you want more information about X, Y, and Z?" And I was like, I don't even live in Nevada anymore. I'm not even in the service anymore. Like, what if I really truly needed help? Like, you're going to call me a year later?
That's
It was
horrible.
just insane. It's just insane to me. So, from your experience, and I know you work with like females going from, again, active duty to transitioning, like, is this things that you've been hearing as well? Or like, what are a lot of these women experiencing?
So a lot of women don't even want to be in the VA system. They don't feel welcome there. They don't even want to go that route. They'll usually get health insurance through their job. And the VA is just like a backup plan. But I know a lot of other women that don't even have a choice. Maybe they are going to school, especially who are going to school, and you don't have that health insurance. So they're having to use the VA. And they're struggling because the VA is really short on mental health. And, women, a lot of women and men are seeking mental health care, especially in that younger demographic, because we're more open to it. We know it's more of a priority for us. So the VA just doesn't have the resources. I went last year. I had kind of a breakdown, and I was just told that we just have group therapy. We don't have individual therapy right now. So yeah, it's a struggle. But there are a lot of great nonprofits, and there's a lot of places you can go to free therapy if anyone needs resources.
Yeah, can you just speak on that? Because like I am not actually like really aware of the other sources that could potentially be used.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you can go state by state, even. I would recommend people looking at local resources. So I was able to use Easter seals, and they're only in the DMV area. So that's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. But there's other places like that where you just call, say, hey, I'm a veteran, I need help, and they will match you with a therapist, or they will get you into a program, and it can be totally virtual. So there's a lot of nationwide ones. I could send you a list, or maybe you could put it in the notes on this, because there is a lot of help out there.
Oh, good. And I definitely think that people need to realize like mental health is health, and there is no shame in seeking out help, because sometimes like, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just resonating with that because yeah, it took me years before I wanted to reach out.
And I think like a lot of people too think that they have to, they have to do it for years or whatever. But sometimes like just doing therapy or, medication just to get over the hump is all that you need. Like, and I think people need to, acknowledge that you don't need to go to therapy for years and years. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back.
Right, right. It's something that you can go back to, you can start it, and then you're kind of in control. And that was something I struggled with the first time I went, because I didn't really match up with my therapist that well. And I didn't say anything because I didn't know that you could, it's your job to say, hey, this isn't working, like, could I be matched with someone else? So that's another thing, like, you're in control. If it's not working for you, say something and make it work.
Hmm. So why, and I know you mentioned this, like the reason why the suicide risk is increased with women because of like sexual trauma, some of the things that, we deal with that are different than men. So as we transition out, there tends to be like a lot of isolation. In what ways does that transition from military service to civilian life contribute to those feelings of isolation, and especially among like the female veterans?
Oh, yes. Isolation is it's so much more common than we know. And it's almost like we feel like we're not a part of this tribe anymore. We are on the outside of it. Even maybe you felt this as a military spouse. I did, even though my husband was still in. I felt like, okay, like I'm not a part of that anymore. And it was even kind of more isolating because it was right in front of me and I'm like, yeah, I'm not a part of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't wear that uniform anymore. So it's just like kind of natural for us to want to isolate, and then we're pretty stubborn when it comes to seeking help or just wanting to reach out and find that new sense of community. I was under the mindset of like I could do it all myself, like I can do it on my own, I'll figure it out, I don't need to call anyone or reach out. And it's just a mindset that we have, and kind of like the military maybe builds us to be like that because you don't want to reach out, you don't want to bother people, especially higher ups in that. And so what do? You just kind of separate yourself, and slowly it becomes more and more comfortable, and then you're kind of stuck. So yeah, that's what I went through. Did you go through anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's still kind of like that now too. And again, I saw another post that you made, I think it was yesterday, but it's like now that I'm out, but I'm still kind of involved with being like the military spouse. I'm like, well, I kind of want to get back in. And I remember seeing this post, you were like, is it a feeling that like what do you miss about it? And I was like, "Oh, that is like a really good question." Because I think, we're like, well, maybe I should just go back in and get that sense of community. And especially if our spouse is still in, because you're constantly moving every 2, 3 years. I mean, I feel like it would be a little bit more easier if you were established somewhere so you could build your roots. But if you're uprooting every 2, 3 years, you're re going through this whole isolation and trying to connect with people. And I don't know about you, but it's a lot harder for me to connect with the spouses who never served,
Hmm.
only because there is like kind of like that lack of knowledge, maybe. I don't know if that would be it, but it is isolating. And then sometimes I do wonder, like, should I go back in? Like, have you ever thought about like going back in, or like, what do you tell people? They're like, oh, maybe I should go back in.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely felt like that too. And I know what you mean because it's like you just feel othered all the time. You just feel like, okay, like I'm the extra one, or you guys are talking about this, but I'm not a part of that anymore. And you miss that. You're like, I was a part of that. So yeah, and then I watched my husband go through it. He got out 2 years after me, and I watched him go through it, and I remember him being like, I'm signing up, I'm re-signing back up, I just called a recruiter and blah blah. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, what do you actually miss about it? And for him, because I think it's different for everyone. Like, I'm like you, I miss
Right.
that community, but for him, he missed that sense of purpose, and he wasn't finding that in his
Mm,
job, and he missed feeling like he was doing something valuable and leading others. um but I would say it's a phase, because as soon as he found something that he's passionate about, and he got a new job and he was helping train others, like he found that again, and he was like, yeah, there's no way I could go back in. Like, I'm not dealing with all that BS that I had. So yeah, I would say it's a phase, and it's something we all go through, and it's something that can take years before it completely goes away.
I do think you're right about like the sense of purpose, because I joined when I was 18, and then I served 8 years. And then once I got out, I was like, well, what do I do with myself? Like, who am I? Like, I went from my parents' house to the military. Like, I've always been under someone, if you will, so to speak. But like, it's, yeah, it's just trying to find that purpose. And I was actually talking to someone the other day doing another podcast, and she was like, TAPS needs to do, which is obviously the transition assistance program. I was like, I feel like there's an S for something, but
Right.
so anyway, the transition program, I was like, the transition program, from going from military to civilian, she was like, they need to do a workshop on like not feeling isolation and realizing like who you are going out of the military, because there isn't a lot of support systems. They kind of just, they're like, here you go, you're out of the military, good luck. And like, there's some programs that are great. They're like, yeah, go to school, but okay, what does that mean? Like, how is my education going to, or how is my experience going to translate to the civilian world? And I think
Yeah.
there was another post I saw of yours was like, everyone's, I know, I like, if you're not following her, I strongly recommend it because like she posts some like a really amazing stuff on Instagram. There was one, it was like, okay, yeah, we did this badass, military service, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the civilian world. Like, can you kind of speak on that post? Because I know you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So I was kind of talking about how no one really cares about what you did in the military, and it was meant to come off as harsh, and I just meant you should have that mindset going forward because the civilian world, they don't speak military at all. They're going to look at you crazy when you're in the office and you talk about how you used to, I don't know, like carry big guns on the flight deck or whatever you were doing. They're not going to look at the specifics that you did and pick out what's unique. And again, yeah, I'm painting with a broad brush because there are some employers that really look for that, especially in like the military industry. But if you have the mindset that you built all this stuff up in the military, you got all these ribbons, you got all these qualifications, you kind of built that for the military and it doesn't really translate out. And so it's hard because I know people who have got out as like E8s, E9s, 5s, 6s, and they've gotten fired from their first few jobs because the civilian world doesn't care about what you did and who you were in the military. They want to know how they can use you now. What kind of education do you have? What's transferable? So it was like a hard pill to swallow, but I'm glad a lot of people saw that and they were like, okay, maybe I should rethink things because you will be disappointed if you go out thinking that you could get a job right away.
Like, so what advice would you give someone to like kind of change that mindset?
I would say, I think it's kind of like just don't focus on what you've done, but focus on what you can do. Really put your effort into yourself and building up what maybe you already know that you like. How can you practice new skills? If you want to go to school, if you like working with your hands, how can you volunteer or just build your resume up on the civilian side if that's what you're looking, if career wise, that's what I would say. Oh,
Yeah,
and one more
I
thing,
think there are, yeah.
look into different programs if school wasn't your thing, because like you said, most of us joined at 18 and we probably didn't have the best educational experience. Like we're like turned off by education, so just think of like different ways that you could get credits. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something to like think about too is like, so when I was in, they like really pushed like, oh, get a bachelor's. So I got one, but I don't use it at all. Like I was just essentially checking a box. I thought I wanted to do something on a completely different career path. And I think a lot in the society, just in general, really pushes that 4-year education. But, you know, the vocational schools, those technical schools, like they make a lot of money. Like you do not need to go to a 4-year college um, to do really well post military.
Right,
And
right. That's very true.
I think like a lot of people don't use their GI Bill enough. Go use it. You earned it. And you have probably a lot more GI benefits than you realize.
Yeah, yeah. I know two people who have gone on and got their they've went to pilot school with it and they're training to get, they're like putting in their flight hours right now. It's very flexible. You can use it for a lot of different things.
Hmm. Are you familiar with how it works? Because I know you mentioned you work or kind of dealt with the VA, like with the whole VA and GI Bill benefits. Are you familiar with that? Like, can you speak on that, or
Yeah,
you just know that it's good?
I could try because I feel like the GI Bill gets so many updates and there's so many new stipulations that have come out, especially in the past like 6 years. My husband just graduated and it took him 7 years, but he did it all online back in August. So I know a little, but I just there's so many new changes and also VRNE. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
It's veterans readjustment and education. So it's basically as long as you have one credit left on your GI Bill and it goes off of your rating, your disability rating, your service connected, you can even go on and get your master's, or if you want to get trained in maybe underwater welding, I don't know, something different, they will pay for it. They will work with you to see how they can change your career that way.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I feel like post service that we are just unaware of because the resources aren't there. And I know, again, or at least they're not presented to us. And I know you work with, again, transitioning individuals. Like, what are some of the top resources that you tell people to check out?
Oh, again, it varies. It's so different for everyone. But I would say definitely make sure that you're signed up for the VA medical. Just get signed up. Definitely put in your disability. Go over your records. A lot of times we don't even remember what's in our records. And when you go through it, you can find new things to claim. And definitely, there's the home loan. A lot of people get out and go into real estate, and a lot of people go out and want to be entrepreneurs, and there's so many like bunker labs, there's so many good places for people to go and get that training, or just even to go and check it out, see if it's for you. So it definitely depends on the person, but I promise you, no matter what you are into, if you are into goat farming as a veteran, there's probably a group for you. So you can get as specific as you want.
Yeah, that is funny. So you mentioned the VA medical, and I guess I'm not very familiar. So I have 30%, but would I be able to get the additional VA medical, or how does that work? Like, how do you sign up for that?
Yeah, so as long as you can always be enrolled. I was 0% and connected, and I was enrolled. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you are just your 5 years, your first 5 years out of service, the VA will take you and you can enroll no matter what your rating is. And so yeah, you could definitely be eligible for some services. I think with any rating, you can go to the VA and get care covered. But I'm
Oh, wow,
not
I
sure
didn't.
on that.
Yeah, it's something to definitely. I feel like we should, or at least I'll definitely look into because that's interesting. I didn't even know you could even enroll. Like, I thought you had to be. Honestly, I thought you had to be like 100% to even enroll.
No. No, definitely not. You can enroll at any rating, and they want you to, because that's a great way for them to track data and keep track of you and make
Mm,
sure, like be able to reach out, send you mail once in a while. So,
mm, of course, of course. So kind of going into kind of what you mentioned, like inclusiveness and like finding a group that you're interested in post military. What barriers do you think exist for female veterans, like in um, accessing and participating in those veteran support networks and communities?
yeah, so I see a lot of women don't even want to identify as a veteran, just because, and there's many different reasons they don't want to be looked at as, different, or, I feel like even when I tell people I'm a veteran, maybe you feel like this too. They kind of like look you up like, oh, like you were military? That's weird. Like, I don't expect that. Like, especially like some of us
Mm-hmm.
who are more maybe like girly. I don't know. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
women don't even put that identity on them. I know I didn't, tell people I was a veteran for a while. And so just that kind of keeps us from not seeking help, not feeling like we belong in those veteran spaces, because a lot of times it is looked at as that old boys club, the Legion. It's mostly men. I mean, mostly men are veterans. So it's just the thing, but we don't see ourselves in that space, especially younger veterans, especially moms, like, where do I fit in here? Like, can I bring my kids, sort of thing? So, and you can't bring
Mm-hmm.
your kids to the VA. There's kids aren't allowed there. So that's another reason why it's hard for us, because we also have to find daycare and then go to the appointment. So it's just the kind of systems they have to change, and they have to be more catering to women veterans, because there's going to be more of us in the coming years.
So, what would be your suggestion on how veteran organizations and support networks can be more inclusive and of the unique needs and experiences of female veterans?
Invite us to the table. Make sure that if you have a board, you have women on that board. If you have leaders, make sure you have women leaders, because that's the only way that you're gonna have systems change is if you have women veterans in these roles that can make that change, that can speak up and talk about things and be a part of the next policies or the next rules of your organization, include women.
How do you think like the military itself before we transition can help like make sure that women feel like the female veterans feel supported like in and as they transition out?
Oh, I think the military has a lot of work to do on that, and I think they know that, but just maybe even having, just having more mentorship available or just more transparency on what it's like if more of us talk about things like the difficulties we had, I think more people will recognize that yes, there's going to be a challenges, and it's not that we need to make things, we're going to have challenges no matter what, but I think it's just the mindset of meeting that first challenge and not overcoming it and feel like we failed and wanting to give up. We need to just show that you just need to be flexible through transition in that. But as far as telling the military, I don't even know where to start. They just got to really look internally and look at the culture and how they've been treating women for a while,
Do
forever.
you have any like yeah. Do you have any experiences like own personal experiences like when you were in the military?
As far as like how it was being a
Just
woman, or
yeah.
oh
And
yeah,
like just not having not having that inclusivity and just kind of almost being outcasted or not treating as like an equal or like what are your experiences?
yes, yeah, I've had some pretty nasty ones and some pretty like I've dealt with sexual harassment, sexual assault, and I've also had places where I felt really accepted and, we were all on the same level. So it just, what really made the difference was the culture of the command or the culture of who was in charge. If they respected me, everyone else around me was going to respect me and, treat me professionally. But if whoever was in charge, even if it was a woman, and I know we've all seen women leaders who were harder on their female subordinates for
Mm.
whatever reason. And so if that was setting the tone, then yeah, I wouldn't get that respect and I wouldn't be treated as professional. How about you?
I mean, like being a woman, yeah, I think the sexual harassment was definitely kind of up there. I can't say I was like ever sexually assaulted, but the harassment definitely was up there. And it's when you think about like the and I know okay, like when you think about it now, a lot more women are coming into the military. So I joined in like '09. So that I would think not think. It was more of like a 1 to 7 ratio. Like there was one
Right.
female to like 7 guys. So, and then I never deployed, but like I would hear this a lot from just like the guys talking. They were like, oh, the deployment goggles. She's a 4 in real life, but she's a 10 deployed. And then they would all kind of quote, quote, pounce on the females that are deployed and uncomfortable. And I did have a troop talk to me saying that she was, sexually assaulted. And, as a supervisor at the time, like all you want to do is just like protect like your troops. Like they're almost like your kids in an unbiological way, but like that's all you wanted to do. And at least that's how I felt for my troops, and especially like being, a woman and a caregiver. Uh, like I just wanted to protect. And sometimes it's like, you know, anytime that I would try to like speak up, I felt like a lot of people would shut me down, or like I had to be more abrasive so people would listen to me and be like, no,
Hmm.
she needs this, or no, he needs to be out, like kicked out. There was this one troop I had who should have not been in the military, and people didn't want to do the paperwork to kind of lead him into, the civilian life. They're like, "Oh, he seems to be doing better." I'm like, "No, he is not. Like,
Yeah.
why are you shutting me out?" And
Mhm.
so I felt like when I was in, a lot of the times I had to be a little bit more abrasive and almost like be more like a bitch in order
Right.
to be respected and not stomped over.
No, yes, exactly. It was like if and it was, like, hard because then you didn't wanna be labeled as a bitch, you didn't wanna be labeled as difficult
Mhm.
to work with or someone that, isn't a team player. But it's like, you don't listen to me unless I raise my voice. Like, I would get called out, like, "Why are you raising your voice?" And I'm like, "You guys won't listen to me unless I get upset or emotional, so that's why I'm getting like this." So,
Yes.
it's frustrating. Yeah, I feel that.
And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, you don't want to be considered like have a label. And I just naturally have like a resting bitch face. So, like, and I'm very introverted, believe it or not. So, like, people would just be like, "Well, I'm afraid of her." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want you to be afraid of me, but like, come on. You still got to
Right.
respect me."
Yeah,
So,
it's
like,
such a fine line to walk.
I know. So I'm like, I don't know what you want from me. But when you were dealing with like the sexual harassment and sexual assault, like, did you feel like your leadership had your back? Or do you feel like you
I
had to kind of keep it to yourself?
Yeah, I didn't even feel, faith in my leaders to reach out, and also, like, I could really internalized it as, like, it was me, I took on that shame of, like, I put myself in that situation, or I did something wrong, so I never told anyone until a lot later, but if I would have had that trust in leadership, I don't know, maybe it would have been a different story.
Do you think because like a lot of people don't have trust in their leadership or don't feel like they could go to anyone, is that like why? Like kind of going back to the whole increase of suicide risk, like do you feel like that is a huge contributor?
I think it does. You can't say that it doesn't. And it's also just how the military works, you're moving around every 2 to 3 years. It's hard to build that repertoire and that trust takes time. And when you're getting leaders in and out or you're moving and you're getting new leaders
Mhm.
or new people under you, it's just hard to build that stability. So yeah, and just modeling good leadership it's hard, and at least in the Navy, you didn't get promoted based on your leadership skills. You got promoted based on your knowledge and a test, and it's like that doesn't equate
Mhm.
to good leaders. So we would have people in charge that were super smart and great at their job, but they couldn't lead people. They couldn't lead sailors or tell people what to
Mhm.
do, and so they would just get ran over and yeah, it was just kind of a nightmare. I wish there was more like leadership training that people could do or maybe something.
Yes. No, I actually like 1000% agree with that because the Air Force is the same way. Like, just because you're a master sergeant doesn't mean like you have the leadership skills. Like, honestly, when I went through Airman Leadership School, so when you go from E4 to E5, you have to go through Airman Leadership School. And I think it was only like 6 or 8 weeks, but like it barely touched the basis of like how to be a leader. It was more like this is how you write an award package. And I'm like, "What? Like why don't you tell me how I could deal with difficult troops or
Mhm.
how, I could, do this better?" But I do agree with you that, just because you have the rank doesn't mean, you know, you're a leader. And maybe that is something that the military should consider is like some people just want to be really good at their job and then have like more of like a career path that way. And then someone does want to be a supervisor and then build them to be a real good leader.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, that's so true because I'm looking at my job and it's like I can't see myself in a leadership position in my job and like I'm okay just staying where I'm at and riding it out until I do find the career path that matches for me. But there should be something like that in the military. Like you could just stay where you are, and just be really good at the technical part of your job. And when you're ready to be a leader,
Mhm.
we'll supply the school for you and we'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for, technical. I was like, there is like something on the front, like I'm trying to figure out what it was. Yeah, no, the technical aspect of your job. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Do you have like any recommendations for like leadership books or podcasts that, people can, read or listen to kind of improve themselves? Because sometimes we have to take our
Ooh.
career in our own path or transition, the right way.
Yes, yeah, I've always liked leadership books. And my friend wrote one. His name's Jeff Clark. It's called Hear These Truths. That's a great one. I actually was just
Mm.
got this from my library. It's called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I don't know if you've probably
Mm,
heard of her. That's a
yes.
really good one. I'm only halfway through and I'm like really impressed with it. But
Hmm.
there's so many out there and there's so many good ones. So those are just a few that I've recently read.
What, like, from like the leadership books that you've like listened to, or because I do Audible, so I listen. I
Yep.
try to read, but sometimes it doesn't work. What are some of the things that resonated with you, and especially like going from military to civilian? Like, what leadership advice or like tips resonated with you the most?
So so as like a junior sailor, as like an E3, E4, I always thought that to be a leader, I had to become an asshole. Like I had to become someone
Mm,
that everyone hated. I had to do the things that made everyone mad or uncomfortable. And so it made me feel like I couldn't see myself in that role because I don't want to be the jerk. I don't want to be the one like making everyone do things. But then when I got out and I'm reading these leadership books and I'm like, a good leader doesn't
mm,
have to do that. A good leader leads from behind. They're showing the example. They are not forcing, but they are encouraging and inspiring people to want to be the best for the team. And they're empowering people instead of cracking the whip, which I
yeah.
pictured in the military. So that's just one thing that I've really noticed, and now that I see it that way, I could see myself as a leader in my community and in other places like that. That's a good
I
question.
agree with it. Oh, thank you. I kind of, that one just came on the top of my head.
I like
That,
that one.
thank you. So I know when we initially first were setting up this conversation, one of the things that you wanted to be kind of like the title, if you will, is why millennial veterans need to be heard. What does that mean, and what does that mean to you?
Yes, so the younger veterans, like we talked about, women veterans and male veterans, we have the highest suicide rate. We are struggling the most when it comes to mental health. And we don't have any representation. I think there's like one or two millennial veterans that are in government. There's a lot of veterans in government, but there's not a lot of younger veterans. And there's not a lot of younger veterans that are invited to these top places that are making these big decisions in the VA. So it's just so important for us to be heard in our wants and our needs because, like I mentioned, the VA is not matching our demand for mental health, and so we just need to be heard. We need to be acknowledged that we are here, and it's the fastest growing rate is the younger veterans. Like as more and more of the Korean and Vietnam veterans pass on, millennial veterans are growing the most, and it's going to stay that way as the biggest chunk of veterans are going to be younger. So we need our systems to reflect.
What's the best way, or what advice would you give someone who wants to make a change but doesn't know where to start or doesn't want to get into the political side of things?
Right, right, and that's not for everyone. I know that. And just start local. Like I started going to my VA commission county meetings. So
Mm,
Veterans Affairs might have a commission in each county, or just see what your county does for veterans if they have some sort of board, and start showing up. I mean, I'm the youngest by 15, 20 years there, and one of the only women there, but it's important that I'm there, and they actually really listen to me, and they help me get up on opportunities. Like I was able to interview this secretary of the VA here in Maryland, so you'll be surprised
That's
at how
awesome.
happy they are that you show up. And even though you might feel weird at your Legion, show up to a meeting, just see how it goes. And maybe the first one, but if you keep showing up, then they'll be like, all right, they're here to make a change. They're here to be a part of this. You kind of have to prove your point to them. Like, I'm not just coming for a meeting. I'm here because, and I'm gonna keep showing up. So they'll eventually respect that. But yeah, I encourage you, and I know it's hard. Like, it's hard because they have their meetings late, and we all have kids or whatever. It doesn't match your job schedule, but just show up in some capacity online or somewhere, and your voice matters, your opinion matters.
What, like, just to kind of like wrap up, like, if someone was listening to this podcast right now, what would you want them to take most away?
Yeah, I would say if anything I can harp on more is look into local resources, local ways you can get involved. And if you're not in that point of I'm a veteran yet, like just take that identity because that's something you'll have forever. The military identity was temporary, but the veteran one's forever. And you can always wear that. And that's your ticket into a lot of spaces and a lot of resources. So I would say that and look into what's available to you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like the whole veteran, like they can't take that away from you. So own it. And women veterans are very few and far in between. And although we're increasing slowly but surely, like own it. You did your
Mm-hmm.
time and no one's ever going to take that away from you. So yeah, I couldn't have said that anything better. And I know one of the things that you do have is called the veteran workbook. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
What is that?
Yeah, so I've always been into journaling and reflecting, so I created a workbook for veterans to fill out when you have time. Go through there's different themes in there, and I talk a lot about what we talked about here, talking about isolation, your identity, who are you now, that sense of purpose, finding that community, and it's just a book of questions, so just asking you things to help you realize what you want out of life, plan your future, decide who you are now, and reflect on your past because you need to heal that part too.
Mm, so true. Where can someone find this? Is it on Amazon or do you have a website?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, but you can't find it yet. So if you click
Mhm.
the link in my Instagram, that's the best place to find it.
And I will add that into the show notes because I think
Thank
that's
you.
amazing. Yes, I love this. So where can people find you? Because I know we already just mentioned Instagram. What's your Instagram? Do you have LinkedIn? Actually, well, obviously we know we have LinkedIn because that's how I met you. Where can people find you?
Yeah, Instagram's the best place at the Millennial Veteran. And I am on LinkedIn, but like I said, I post there really passionately, maybe twice a month. And I do have a monthly column in Task and Purpose that comes out usually like the first week of every month. So that's another place you can find me.
Oh, nice. And you also have a podcast too called the Vet Chats.
Yes. Yes. I have a podcast and we do that live on Instagram. So that's Sundays at 9 p.m.
Oh, awesome. Is that
Yeah.
Eastern time? Because you're in Maryland, correct?
Yes. Yep. That's Eastern time.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
check that out. I always see the post. I didn't know it was live on Instagram. That's awesome.
Yeah. We got to get you on there.
Yeah, girl. Well, I appreciate you so much for doing this. Like I said, guys, if you're not following her, she posts a lot of intriguing, questions to kind of make you, really think about your service and what you want to do moving forward. So again, if you're not following her, hit her up on Instagram. Um, I promise you won't be disappointed.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is great.
Well, if anyone has any questions, please reach out to me or her. Otherwise, thanks again, Jenna. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.